The train hissed like a dying snake as it screeched to a halt at the dusty station of Hollow Creek. It was a place where men came and went, where goods traded hands, but where women rarely lingered without purpose. The platform was nearly empty except for a handful of townsfolk watching the passengers step off. Among them stood a woman in a faded blue dress, her hat brim casting a shadow over her tired eyes. She carried no luggage save for a small worn satchel clutched tightly in her hands. Her name was Clara, but no one in Hollow Creek knew her yet. For 3 days she sat on the wooden bench inside the station, a lonely figure waiting as if someone, anyone, might appear and say they'd been expecting her. But no one came. The station master, a gruff man with tobacco-stained teeth, kept glancing at her between ticket sales, muttering to himself that she'd either break or disappear soon enough. On the first night, some of the local ranch hands whispered about her as they passed through, calling her a runaway bride or worse. On the second, an old widow brought her a cup of soup, though Clara barely touched it. By the third morning, Hollow Creek had begun to treat her as a shadow, a curiosity with no claim or purpose. But then it happened. The sun was blazing overhead, burning the platform boards hot enough to blister bare feet, when a small figure emerged from the crowd. A little girl with tangled blonde curls and a patched gingham dress tugged at her guardian's arm, eyes wide as saucers. She broke free, darted across the platform, and stopped dead in front of Clara. Her little voice rang out, sharp and certain, cutting through the murmur of the station. "That's her. Can you be my mama?" The station fell silent. Heads turned. A few jaws went slack. Clara froze, her hands gripping her satchel so tight her knuckles whitened. She looked down at the girl, who was staring up at her with a hope so raw it was almost painful. The guardian, a woman worn down by years of hardship, rushed forward, her face crimson with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, miss," she stammered, trying to pull the child back. "Don't mind her. She don't know better." But the girl fought against her grasp, eyes never leaving Clara. "Mama, I found you," she insisted. "I told you she'd come back." Clara's throat tightened. She hadn't cried in years, not since the war had taken her husband and left her with nothing but debts and scars too deep for anyone to see. Yet here was this child, small hands reaching for her, as if fate itself had dropped her in Clara's path. The station master coughed into his hand, uncomfortable. A rancher muttered, "Lord Almighty," under his breath. And still, the girl's words lingered like smoke in the air. For 3 days no one had claimed Clara. Now, a child she had never seen before was trying to claim her. That night, Clara didn't sleep on the station bench. Instead, she sat in the corner of a drafty boarding house room, the girl curled up against her side, clutching Clara's skirt as if afraid she'd vanish come morning. The child's guardian, who turned out to be her aunt, confessed over a cup of weak coffee that the girl's parents had died the previous winter from fever. Since then, the girl, Annie, had been in her care. But the aunt was leaving town with a man who wanted no children, and Annie would be sent to the church orphanage. Annie, however, had other plans. "I prayed for a mama," she whispered that night before drifting into sleep. "And then I saw you." Clara stared at her for a long time, something stirring in her chest she hadn't felt in years. She could have walked away. She could have boarded the next train and vanished into another nameless town. But Annie's words had rooted themselves deep inside her, and Clara knew she couldn't walk away, not now. The next morning, Hollow Creek awoke to rumors. A child had chosen a stranger as her mother. Some found it laughable, others unsettling. The preacher warned Clara that taking in another's child was no small thing, especially with her reputation unknown. But Annie clung to her like a calf to its mother, and Clara let her. It wasn't long before trouble found them. On the fourth day, a man rode into Hollow Creek, a bounty hunter by the look of him, with a scar across his cheek and a pistol that hung heavy on his hip. His name was Jeb Carter, and he had Clara's name on a slip of paper. She had been running, though not from the law. A banker's son in Missouri had once tried to buy her hand, and when she refused, he spread word that she'd stolen from him. A price had been put on her capture, not high, but enough for men like Jeb to follow. He found her outside the general store, Annie's hand in hers. "Mrs. Whitlock?" he asked, voice low and dangerous. Clara stiffened. "You've got the wrong woman." Annie squeezed her hand tighter, eyes darting between them. "Mama," she whispered. Jeb smirked. "Ain't no use denying. Papers say a widow, brown hair, blue dress." That's you. Now you best come quiet, or this gets messy." The townsfolk watched from a distance, whispering. But no one stepped in. Hollow Creek wasn't a place for heroes. Clara could have run. She could have begged. Instead, she lifted her chin, pulling Annie behind her. "If you take me," she said, her voice steady, "you'll have to drag a child through the dust with me. You want that on your conscience?" Jeb hesitated, his eyes flicking to Annie. For a moment, something unreadable crossed his face. But money was money, and men like him didn't walk away from it. He reached for his pistol. That's when the shot rang out. It wasn't Clara. It wasn't Jeb. It was Sheriff Tom Dillard, a man who rarely involved himself in matters unless absolutely necessary. His rifle barrel still smoked as he stepped forward. "She's under my protection now," he said, voice cold. "You take one more step, Carter, and I'll put another hole in you." The bounty hunter snarled but backed away. "This ain't over," he spat, climbing onto his horse. "Ain't no woman with a price on her head gonna hide behind a sheriff forever." Then he rode out of town, leaving dust in his wake. The station master shook his head later that day. 3 days no one claimed her, he muttered. Now look, half the town's talking about her. Clara knew the truth. Annie had claimed her. And that claim was stronger than any bounty, stronger than any past she tried to outrun. Over the weeks that followed, Clara found herself weaving into Hollow Creek's fabric. She took work sewing, mending clothes, even cooking when the boarding house needed help. Annie followed her everywhere, brightening every corner they entered. At night, Clara would tuck her in, still marveling at the strange twist of fate that had placed them together. But shadows lingered. Jeb Carter wasn't a man to let go, and Clara knew others would come. The past had a way of chasing, and it wouldn't rest until it caught her. Yet for the first time in years, Clara wasn't afraid. Because now, when she looked into Annie's eyes, she saw more than fear and loss. She saw a reason to fight. And she knew this child, this little girl who had stood on a dusty station platform and shouted to the world, "That's her," was her redemption. The story of the woman at Hollow Creek spread far beyond the town. Some called it foolishness, others a miracle. But those who witnessed it would never forget the moment a child chose a stranger to be her mother, and that stranger chose to stay. It was not the life Clara had expected. It was harder, riskier, filled with dangers she had never imagined. But it was hers. And it was Annie's. And together, they were no longer waiting at a station for someone to claim them. They had already claimed each other.